The House will come to order. All members take their seats. All guests, please clear the aisle. Is there anything in the rules? Yeah. Clerk will unlock the machine. All members record their presence by pressing the green button. All members, please vote. Clerk, please lock the machine. We have 64 present. There is a quorum. All rise for the invocation to be given by Deputy Speaker Lima, who will also lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Deputy Speaker Lima.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. Dear God, we ask you to bless this House of Representatives with wisdom and the goodwill to work together to find solutions that are just and appropriate. Bless us this day and every day, and may all that we do be for the betterment of all Rhode Islanders. Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Is there any objection to the approval of the journal of the previous legislative day? Hearing none, so ordered. Communications. Clerk, do we have any communications?
Yes, we do, Speaker.
Please read and place on file.
Representative James N. McLaughlin is unable to attend session today, Tuesday, May 11th, 2021.
Thank you. Any committee reports? There are no committee reports. New business. Is there any new business? Chairman Craven with new business. Representative O'Brien with new business. Floor Manager Edwards with new business. Chairman Casey with new business. Representative Baginski with new business. Representative Shawcross Smith with new business. Any other new business? We can come back to new business if you're still waiting for Ledge Council to get you your bills. Next order of business is the calendar. Clerk, please read the first item on today's calendar.
Item 1, number 5491.
Chairman McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 5491 by Deputy Whip Ackerman and also supported by the Rhode Island General Treasurer Seth Magaziner would require the Council on Elementary and Secondary Education, in consultation with the Rhode Island Department of Education, to develop and approve a statewide academic standards for instruction of consumer education in public schools no later than December 31st, 2021. Mr. Speaker, 37 states have a requirement that students be competent in financial literacy. In the state of Rhode Island, we have a tremendous need for this, as evident in the student loan debt, our mortgage foreclosures, and worst of all, some of our students who receive the least amount of financial education in communities that are most susceptible to predatory financial products, such as my own, with payday lending on every other corner. So for these reasons, and the fact that this is supported by the Credit Unions of Rhode Island, Rhode Island Student Loan Association, the Next Gen Personal Finance Organization, Council for Economic Education, and hundreds of teachers and administrators. For all of those reasons, I compliment Deputy Speaker Whip Ackerman for putting this great coalition and bill together, and I move passage.
Thank you. Chairman McNamara moves passage, seconded by Representative Carson, Representative Speakman, Representative Amore, Representative Phillips, Chairman Craven, Representative O'Brien, Chairman Shanley, Chairwoman Vella Wilkinson, Representative Morales, Representative Caldwell, Representative Hawkins, Representative Henrys, Representative Rangel Vassal, Chairman Abney, Leader Blazajewski, Chairwoman McEntee, Chairwoman Ruggiero, Chairwoman Williams, Representative Constantino, Chairwoman Serpa, Representative Kazar, Representative Cortravan, Chairwoman Fogarty, Representative Agello, Representative Shawcross-Smith, Deputy Whip Ackerman, Chairman Bennett, Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy, Chairman Hull, Representative Tanzi, Floor Manager Edwards, Representative Giraldo, Representative Falella, Leader Filippi, Representative Magor, Representative Messier, Representative Barrows, Representative Elzate, Whip Kazarian, Representative Casimiro, Chairman Casey, Representative Morgan. I believe that completes the second. Representative Donovan also seconding. There are no lights on the bill. Clerk, please unlock the machine. All those in the affirmative, please vote green. Any in the negative, please vote red. Leader Blazajewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Rule 47 of the House Rules, I have proxy votes in favor of item number 1 from the following representatives: Felix, Knight, Lombardi, McLaughlin, Perez, Solomon, and Tabone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Leader Filippi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same request in the affirmative. Representatives Roberts and Quattrochi, please.
Thank you. Clerk, please lock the machine. 73 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. The act prevails. Next docketed item, please.
Item number 2, number 6051.
Representative O'Brien.
Thank you, Speaker. This bill comes to us from Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. This act would rename the state airport in Warwick from T.F. Green State Airport to Rhode Island T.F. Green International Airport. It passed out of committee with bipartisan support, 14-1. It's a good bill, and I move passage.
Thank you. Representative Kennedy moves passage, seconded by Representative Caldwell, Representative Bia, Representative Carson, Chairwoman McEntee, Chairwoman Vella Wilkinson, Leader Blazajewski, Chairman Abney, Representative Donovan, Representative Handy, Representative Agello, Representative Shawcross-Smith, Chairwoman Fogarty, Representative Cortravan, Chairman Azanaro, Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy, Floor Manager Edwards, Representative Slater, Whip Kazarian, Deputy Whip Ackerman, Chairman McNamara, Representative Messier, Representative Barrows, and Representative Casimiro, as well as Chairman Bennett and Chairwoman Ruggiero. On the bill, Deputy Speaker Lima.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. And before I start, I wanted to second Representative Ackerman's, Deputy Whip Ackerman's excellent piece of legislation. I thought my light was lit, but it didn't light.
No worries, so ordered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise in strong opposition to one of the most ill-conceived, fiscally wasteful, blatantly misrepresented, and fundamentally flawed pieces of legislation we are asked to pass from an agency, RIAC, and its president, Ithaca Ahmad, with a long history of conflicts, malfeasance, costing our taxpayers millions of dollars. And this bill is another example of that malfeasance. No airport in the country of over 5,000 airports is named after their state, and for a good reason, a good economically sound reason, something that RIAC and its president cannot begin to understand because of their malfeasance. All of the airports are named after a metropolitan area within the state that is marketed as a destination for tourists to visit. The explanation that because we are a small state, we can do what other states cannot do is patently false, economically unsound, a market disaster, and another example of the total lack of competence by RIAC and its president, Ithaca Ahmad. By using the false narrative that Rhode Island's size makes it all right to use the state name for our airport, gives credence to the belief that Rhode Island does not have attractive metropolitan areas worthy of marketing. Do the representatives from Newport believe that Newport is not worth a marketing destination? Do the representatives for Providence believe that Providence, with the Dunk University's cultural attractions, financial center, is not worthy of being marketed as a destination? Do the reps from Jamestown or South County or Block Island feel that communities are not worthy of being marketed as a destination? Of course not. And that is why over 5,000, every other airport in the country is named after metropolitan destination. Doesn't it bother you that every other state in the nation decided not to name its airports after their state, but after a metropolitan destination? It should be, because they were economically smart enough, marketing competent enough, and responsible enough to understand why that is an unsound decision, something that RIAC and its president, Ithaca Ahmad, are incapable of comprehending. Ask any reputable marketing firm, and they will tell you that trying to rebrand an item, here, an airport name, is time-consuming and extremely costly, and oftentimes ineffective. Think of Dunkin' Donuts. They decided to drop donuts from their name. Does anyone say, I'm going to Dunkin' for a coffee? Or do you still say, I'm going to Dunkin' Donuts? Our airport is known nationally as Providence PVD. To rebrand an already familiar name and no name is a waste of money and counterproductive to attracting tourists to Rhode Island. And yet, because of their incompetence, that is exactly what RIAC and its president, Ithaca Ahmad, are doing. The reasons for not using a state's name rather than a metropolitan are overwhelming. And let me add here, as you know, anyone who has flown out of Green, the ticket says PFD, the maps say PFD, all the codes are PFD. PVD, I'm sorry. What did I say? PFD. Sorry about that. Excuse me? You know, you laugh, but let me tell you, this is going to be an embarrassment across the country. The only state. The FAA, the location identifier assigned by the Federal Aviation Administration, uses the code PVD. IATA, the airport code assigned by the International Air Transportation Association, uses PVD. ICAO, the location indicator assigned by the International Civil Aviation Organization, they use PVD. It is known as PVD. It is known as Providence because Providence is our metropolitan area. People know Providence. People do not know Rhode Island. If you go to New York and say I'm from Rhode Island, they say, where's that, in Long Island? There's many, many reasons why this is a very poor decision by an entity that has made many, many poor decisions. When you add up all the reasons why every airport in the country is named after a metropolitan area and not a state, and compare it to the feeble reasons why RIAC wants to do what no airport has done, voting against this legislation is obvious. By the way, where is the fiscal note on this bill? Does anyone in this room believe there is no cost to changing the name? That's what RIAC said. It's not going to cost the taxpayers anything.
1 minute, please.
Well, maybe they're just going to increase the tickets. Guess who flies in and out of TF Green? Rhode Island taxpayers. And we have no fiscal note, another quasi-public entity that nobody's watching them, and the taxpayers are getting raped time and time again. They do what they want, they spend how they want, and this is shameful. How much time do I don't
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, well, and I'll come back again. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairwoman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question to the manager of the bill, if I may.
Representative O'Brien's right behind you.
Representative, what is the justification for the name change? I was on corporation when this bill, a few years ago, when this bill was in conversation. They didn't have one then, really. What is the justification, and if there's a fiscal note that goes with all of this?
Representative, there was no that RIAC said there was no fiscal note. There will be no cost whatsoever to the state. And they want the ability to market the state of Rhode Island. TF Green is not a name that can be marketed. That's their explanation. And I have to agree. Well, I mean, TF Green to people in Florida, what does that mean? Rhode Island is a destination. TF Green is not a destination, and that's their point.
But realistically, nothing says Rhode Island. It says PVD. So that certainly is not an argument that I will say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because they're not saying TF Green. It is clearly saying, and by all partners or all the pieces, it says PVD. And everybody understands that and been understanding. So I want to know the justification, but I accept and appreciate your explanation.
Thank you.
Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. So as was pointed out, this legislation was first introduced 2 years ago. At that time, the proposal was to create Rhode Island International Airport. At that time, Rhode Island actually had international flights that were taking place between the state of Rhode Island and Ireland and other places in Western Europe. After a lot of discussion, after there was a recognition that by removing the name TF Green, might offend the Green family. We recognize that Senator Green did so much for the state of Rhode Island. The airport decided to do a study where they did basically one of those doodle type polls on the internet and see what people were interested in calling this airport. And ultimately, the favored name was Rhode Island T.F. Green International Airport. The Senate has already passed this legislation. I hope that you, the members of this House, will look at this favorably as well. When you land at the airport, there's a sign as you're walking through the terminal to collect your luggage that says, "Welcome to Warwick." You have not landed in Providence. There's a reason for that. The airport is in the city of Warwick. Recognizing that even though we have the airport code of PVD, the fact of the matter is, I think the state should be very proud of the fact that we're going to have an airport named after the state of Rhode Island as well, with the word Rhode Island right up next to that very important name, T.F. Green. So I urge you to support this, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker Lima.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. Well, there you have it, folks. All the signs on the highway, all the literature, it's all going to magically change with no cost at all. I don't think anyone in their right mind in this room or in this state would believe that. Many airports are named after famous people or people who had something to do with aviation. We have Presidents Reagan, Bush, Clinton. I fought for 3 years with the Green family to keep T.F. Green in there. That was another ill-conceived idea by RIAC and its president, Ithaca. I fought them for 3 years. They insisted on getting rid of T.F. Green and naming a hallway or something after him. The first progressive, great governor, great state, who did so much for the airport, and they were ready to get rid of him. But we won that fight. Airports are named after cities and after destinations. But again, none are named after a state. And it's not by accident, it's for a very good reason. One of the many examples I'm going to explain to you is, do people fly into T.F. Green solely to go somewhere in Rhode Island? No, they don't. It's marketed as for Southeast Massachusetts and Connecticut. Some people are going to Massachusetts, they don't want to fly into Logan. They rather fly into T.F. Green, a smaller airport. So now what you're going to do is you're going to market it as the state and limit it, Rhode Island. That is not what airports do. I've talked to many people in aviation, I've talked to pilots, I've talked to them all, because when I was fighting to keep T.F. Green's name in this, for this airport, I received tons of phone calls and emails. That's how I know about all the malfeasance that's going on out there. So where did I leave off? Okay, we have, well, you know what? Let me do this. Let me introduce my amendment, Mr. Speaker. So I'll be talking on the amendment, and I'll talk later on the bill. My amendment is LC 002212/6.
Just a moment, please. Deputy Speaker Lima moves LC 002212/6. Seconded by Representative Constantino, Representative Hawkins, Representative Cardillo, and Representative Chippendale. Are you seconding the amendment? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. What this amendment would do on page 7, between lines 7 and 8, the following language. The Rhode Island Airport Corporation shall also prepare a report to the General Assembly on an annual basis, providing for a full accounting of any and all costs associated with changing the name of the airport, including any marketing related to the name change, and shall include the source of the money utilized to accomplish the same. The report shall include an evaluation of any increase in flights of tourists visiting the state. This legislation is going to cost our constituents money. We know that. Where is that money going to come from? We don't know that. With this amendment, we will be doing our responsible job in watching taxpayer dollars. That's what we should be doing. We should know where the money's coming from, how it's benefiting the state, because this corporation has made so many bad decisions. We already talked about taking TF Green off the airport name. That was one of many. And now they don't want to tell us where this money's coming from. I mean, they spent $8 million for a border control facility. They said, well, border control told us we had to have that with international flights. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I called them up. No, they didn't. They said with 1 or 2 flights, all you have to do is stagger arrival times. But they spent $8 million. Heck, it's not coming out of their pockets. It's coming out of the pockets of the people who went to the polls and elected us to watch their money. At least find out where this money's coming from. How much more are they going to have to pay for tickets to fly to the Dominican and visit a relative, or to fly to Florida? Shouldn't we be doing our responsible duty and know where this money's coming from? I mean, haven't we learned anything with these other quasi-state entities? We don't know what's going on with the money there. Gee, I wouldn't have spent all those years in college to become a teacher if I knew I could have been a waitress making $110,000 at the convention center. It's ridiculous. This is our people's money. People have suffered from this pandemic through no fault of their own, economically and financially. We should be hyper-vigilant on every single dollar that's being spent. And not say we don't want to know how the taxpayers' money's being spent because this guy who has generous fundraisers doesn't want to, who's made so many bad decisions. That's ridiculous. So please, let us at least find out about the money on behalf of our constituents. That's the minimum we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Caldwell on the amendment. Representative Morales, did you want to second the amendment? The light is lit, or did I miss you? You want to second it? So ordered. Representative Morales seconded the amendment.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise in opposition to this amendment. First of all, it's really important to know that no Rhode Island tax dollars are going towards this name change. And in fact, federal guidelines say that airports must be self-sufficient, so any of the marketing materials and changes that have to happen with this name change will be absorbed by RIAC. Further, RIAC already provides annual audited financial statements, quarterly financials, and fiscal year budgets. So this amendment is really duplicative because any expenses associated with their marketing will already come up in those reports, and those reports are already on the RIAC website. And finally, RIAC comes through every audit and review with flying colors from the Rhode Island's Office of Internal Audit. They determine that RIAC is in compliance with the Quasi-Public Corporations Accountability and Transparency Act. This bill is about economic development and, bringing Rhode Island into a place where we can really thrive as tourism comes back after this pandemic. And there is no need for the additional expense required by this amendment. So I would ask all my colleagues to join me in defeating this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker Lima. For the second time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. Yeah, they're fiscally responsible, okay. The second highest paid director of an airport, guess where? Right here in Rhode Island. First time in history, he brought these small airlines in by financial incentives, excusing their landing fees for 2 years. Commercial airlines didn't like that. That's fiscally responsible to do that? That's not how the airport was ever run until Ithaca Ahmad got here. Small airlines were brought in through relationships and meeting with people. So the second highest paid CEO in the country, when he brought those airlines in, he gets bonuses. And I know people who've been trying to find out, on top of his second biggest salary, how much those bonuses are, but they can't find them. I know people who poured through those reports. They're so convoluted. And lastly, I want to say, Mr. Fiscally Responsible, how come the FAA made him give back millions of dollars related to the Westerly Airport? Because the money didn't go where it was supposed to go. So the FAA got him to give the money back. Because see, we have other airports in this state. You'd never know it. And RIAC is responsible for taking care of them. But guess what? They don't. They're supposed to clear the snow, cut the trees. They had a disaster over there in Westerly. The pilots were having a hard time because of the trees. RIAC said, oh, we can't cut them. But they did years before in another airport. They got the money went somewhere else. The FAA had to get the money back. $8 million for border control. $10 million was spent on bathrooms, and some of that money I think was supposed to go somewhere else too. I asked for an answer on that, didn't get one. You really trust these people financially? And let's say you do. Let's say you do trust them for the sake of argument. What is wrong with this elected body getting a report on where they're getting the money? It's not taxpayer dollars. So I don't know who is flying on these flights. Is it cartoon characters that don't pay taxes? I don't know. Go to the airport. Go to the airport and ask the people getting on the plane from Rhode Island, do you pay taxes? Are they all skipping paying their taxes? Is that what he means? This bill is going to cost money, and I bet a lot of money. They don't even have no idea. So, okay, they want to change the name of the airport because they said the pilots can't find the planes. Yes, the pilots can't find the airport. Yes, they did. So they spent, according to their CEO, this is on tape in committee, $500,000 to a Massachusetts company to come up with Rhode Island International Airport. I could have come up with that for a cup of coffee. That's not a waste of money. You know, we talk all the time on this floor about departments not doing the right thing and how we got to pass legislation to fix it. This department has so many conflicts of interest. Amazon ran away. What happened with Uber? That's a whole nother story. Law firms making hundreds of millions of dollars, a relative in commerce. And what happened with Uber? Yeah, somebody had parking lot C there. You want to trust them? You want to trust them and ignore your constituents and not get the information? That's ridiculous. Get the information. I appreciate your support.
Floor Manager Edwards, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise in very strong opposition to this amendment. And quite frankly, Deputy Speaker Lima's argument does not really ring true. She says that she doesn't want to have the airport named after our state. It should be named after a municipality. I guess she's probably leaning towards Providence. With that in mind, she says, no matter what we change the name to, it's going to cost a lot of money. So if we change it to a name that Deputy Speaker Lima agrees with, perhaps the Deputy Speaker Lima T.F. Green Airport, if we change it to a name that she finds acceptable, it's still going to cost the state money, per her argument. When in fact we know, according to the argument raised by Representative Caldwell, that it's not going to cost the taxpayers. These funds are actually going to come out of the airport corporation, who derives their funds from the operations at the airport. Based on that, Mr. Speaker, I urge all of my colleagues to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. On the amendment, there are no other lights. Clerk, please unlock the machine. All those in favor of voting for the amendment, vote green. All those in the negative, please vote red. Everyone vote. There are clerk, please lock the machine. There are 17 in the affirmative, 47 in the negative. The amendment is defeated. We are back on the bill. Representative Chippendale. Whip Chippendale, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Speaker. While I have really no idea where Deputy Lima Speaker stands on this bill, I stand in opposition. Although I did vote for it in committee, and I just want to explain what happened. I went back and listened to the corporation hearings on the issue when it was first suggested to be changed, and followed it through its various iterations and its extremely convoluted process the whole way. It just got watered down. I will say this, Providence, PVD, is what's known. It's what's known across the U.S. It's what's known internationally. More people, if you were to run into them somewhere across the nation, would know where Providence is before they would know where Rhode Island is. I think that is the crux of the issue that Deputy Speaker is bringing up. Furthermore, spending the money to change the name, which was one of the objections raised, were it to be changed on a name that made sense, I think would be a good investment. In this case, I don't think it does make sense for the reasons stated, and then also for the years of testimony that we heard on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker Lima, on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I have an amendment, LC 002212/5.
Deputy Speaker Lima moves for an amendment, LC 002212/5. Is that correct, Deputy Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Seconded by Representative Constantino, Representative Chippendale, Representative Fenton Fung, Representative Cardillo, Representative Hawkins, all seconding the amendment. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I want to tell you the reasons why we should be deleting Rhode Island from it. Besides, you'll be limiting it to the state area instead of the metro area. And I want to add that if we don't change the airport name, because there's a cost to it, that's fine. I worked on, for 3 years, saving TF Green. And then when they came up with Rhode Island, and I realized how bad a decision that was, and will be a laughingstock across the country, in the aviation world at least, I came up with a better name, but that was in committee. Providence TF Green International Airport. Because it was a better name, not because I want to spend money and change the airport name. But I'm fiscally responsible, so I probably would have done my research and found out how much it was going to cost. Providence is known as a national growing international destination, not Rhode Island. That's why I want to delete the name Rhode Island. Air travelers fly to major cities and their metropolitan area. The airport people, they thought that Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport, by the way, Northern Kentucky was a state. I had to tell them, no, it's not. It's their third largest metropolitan area, because that's what airports do, because it's an economically sound reason to do that. And I also want to say I have no problem with adding the word international. I think that adds a benefit. It's limited to the state. Many airports, such as Boston, Hartford, Baltimore, New Orleans, just to name a few, are named after a person like T.F. Green, and they're identified by a major city or metropolitan area, not a state. Many airports, like Tampa, Detroit, Cincinnati, just to name a few, are named after the major city they serve, not the state the airport sits in. Not a single airport in this nation, over 5,000, are named after a state. It is just not done. If we named it Providence instead of Rhode Island, it's the core of the second largest metro area in New England. People do use TF Green to fly to New England, not limited to Rhode Island. Providence is the higher education center of the state, and the Providence Metro and Southeast Massachusetts. Providence, not Rhode Island, is the historical, educational, architectural, manufactural, cultural, performing arts, economic, corporate, sports, media, entertainment, and social center of the state and metro. That's why we should not call it Rhode Island Airport. Providence, as I mentioned before, where it's located as PVD, is clear in bold print on all major maps. Not Rhode Island, not other states. And by the way, if Ithaca put up the sign, you landed in Warwick, what does the flight attendant say when the plane lands? Welcome to
30 seconds, please.
Providence. Providence is the transportation center of the state and the metro, with the nation's 11th busiest Amtrak station. Providence is the state and federal government center of the state. It's all these reasons why we should name the airport after the metro center. Are we on the bill, Mr. Speaker?
On the amendment.
On the amendment, okay.
Your amendment, and you're
That's right.
very close to time.
Okay, so the airport service is far beyond the borders of Rhode Island, as we know, and naming it after a state agency that manages it is a total disservice to the people of this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Caldwell, on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise respectfully in opposition to this amendment. I sit on the House Committee on Corporations where we had a hearing on this bill. We heard from witnesses, we debated in the committee, and this is the bill that we voted out. So to begin, it would be imprudent for all of us here today, to vote to change the name. Also, this name that we've landed on has a lot of support. It has support from the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce. It has support from the Warwick Convention and the Warwick Convention and Visitors Bureau. Further, the Providence Journal did a public poll where they tried to see what its readers and people throughout Rhode Island thought the name of the airport should be. 45% preferred the name Rhode Island International Airport, and 35% preferred TF Green International Airport. So a compromise of those two has really strong public support. One of the big things we're trying to do here, right, is brand this airport to make Rhode Island an international destination for travel. Right now, our airport is not succeeding in that. Even in Rhode Island, 57% of people in a poll could not name our airport. And if you went outside New England, in the United States, 90% of people could not name our airport in Rhode Island. This bill is about tourism, it's about economic development, and it's about making Rhode Island a destination, a place on the map, a place for people to come into our airport and enjoy every city in our beautiful state. So I hope all my colleagues will join me in defeating this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker Lima, is that an old light, or do you want to speak again on the amendment? For the second time, Deputy Speaker Lima on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. The Providence Chamber and all the other entities that were mentioned only had one choice before them, the Rhode Island TF Green International Airport. I put my bill in when I saw this bill because I realized I needed to come up with the right name, a better name, a metropolitan area. So to say, they supported that, but they didn't know the alternative, and I don't know how much they know about aviation. As far as the poll, people want a geographical area, let's give them one. We know polls can say whatever they want. I mean, they spent $500,000 to a Massachusetts company to come up with this name and do a poll, but they didn't have an alternative name like Providence TF Green International Airport in there. And as far as tourism for the state, RIAC is supposed to run the airport, not the state. To market the state, that should be done by the Tourism Council or the Commerce Department. That's who markets the state. See, what they don't understand is they're supposed to be marketing a destination. That's what every other state in this country realized. For an airport, you market the destination, not the state. Therefore, this amendment makes a lot of sense because, as I said, I have no problem with international, but putting it as Rhode Island, we're going to be the laughingstock of the country.
Thank you. Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. Let's right now dispel this particular argument that Deputy Speaker Lima has put out there. In 2018, there was a brand awareness poll. It was conducted by Pan Atlantic Research. That poll cost $25,500. Not $500,000, $25,500. And in that particular poll, they surveyed 1,509 respondents in 4 separate segments. This included 609 Rhode Island residents, as well as other travelers from southern New England, as well as from Europe. And the survey revealed that the name recognition of TF Green Airport is exceptionally low. Even among Rhode Islanders, 57% of Rhode Islanders could not identify TF Green Airport by name as their local commercial airport in Rhode Island. The news gets worse, for among residents of Connecticut and Massachusetts, 67% of the people surveyed, 2/3 of the Connecticut and Massachusetts people, could not identify TF Green Airport unless somebody said the name to them. The news got even worse. For those who live outside of the United States, 87% of the people could not identify TF Green. Now, what's interesting, when the Norwegian Airlines was flying back and forth across the Atlantic, we were able to fill those flights as they went over to Ireland and to Scotland, but we weren't able to fill the flights for people coming back over because they had no idea, where they were going to be landing. So ultimately, when you look at the big picture and you recognize even in the United States, for those people who live outside of New England, 90% of them could not identify TF Green. I think we're making the right decision by placing the word Rhode Island and International in the name of this airport. This is all about economic development. TF Green represents a very important part of the economic development equation here in the state of Rhode Island. It's helping to bring business into the state of Rhode Island, to bring business people into the state of Rhode Island, and helping to market the state of Rhode Island to the rest of the nation. I urge you to defeat this amendment.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker Lima. On the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that expensive report they did, that's when they were doing their ill-conceived notion of trying to get rid of TF Green and put him in a hallway after all he did. Where's General Edward Lawrence Blank International Airport? Anybody know? Anybody? People don't always know the name of the famous people. Well, Logan's airport's name is General Edward Lawrence Logan International Airport. So it doesn't surprise me people don't know TF Green. So the people in Connecticut might not know him. But when you ask the people in Connecticut, do you know Providence? Do you know Rhode Island? Guess what? Rhode Island, where's that in Long Island? Is that somewhere in New York? They know Providence. You know why they know Providence? For many of the reasons I already stated. Providence is the destination. It's the metro area destination. Ithaca ought to worry about what's going on at that airport and not marketing Rhode Island. That's not his job. He's having problems enough at the airport, never mind. Let the people who are supposed to market the state market the state. I don't know why he thinks that's his job. It has to go by the metro destination as every other airport in the country does. Why they're throwing out, people don't know TF Green. I think they're trying to distract you from the real issue here on the geographic name and what it should be. Because nobody here raised their hand to say, well, Logan, the guy in Logan, I didn't even know his name. I always know it as Logan. Maybe they should have asked, do you know what is Green Airport? Providence is the metropolitan area. I wouldn't even have a problem. What about Newport? Geez, that's a heck of a destination for people. Do people know that? A lot of people from New York had summer homes there. Rhode Island should not be there. International's fine. It should actually be the Providence TF Green International Airport. And they might have realized if they didn't spend 3 years trying to get rid of TF Green.
Thank you. There are no other lights on the amendment. All those in favor, please vote green. Any opposed, please vote red. All members, please vote. There are 12 in the affirmative. There are 49 in the negative. The amendment is defeated. Back on the bill. There are no lights. Clerk, please unlock the machine. All those in favor, please vote green. Any opposed, please vote red. Leader Blazajewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Rule 47 of the House Rules, I have proxy votes in favor of item number 2 from the following representatives: Felix, Knight, Lombardi, McLaughlin, Perez, Solomon, and Tabone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Leader Filippi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same request in the affirmative. Representatives Roberts and Quattrochi, please. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Clerk, please lock the machine. There are 63 in the affirmative. There are 9 in the negative. The act prevails. Thank you. Next docketed item, please, Clerk.
Item number 3, number 5223, SubA.
Chairman Abney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Item number 3, 5223 SubA by Speaker Sicarchi. This act authorizes the Lottery Division to enter into contract extensions with IGT and Bally's, formerly Twin River, with the following stipulations. IGT would make an upfront payment of $27 million to the state, invest in the aggregate at least $155 million, and employ a minimum of 1,100 full-time employees throughout the extended contract. Bally's would build a 50,000 square foot expansion of its Lincoln facility, lease at least 20,000 square feet of commercial space in Providence, purchase naming rights for a park in the I-95 redevelopment district, add 30 senior management employees in the state, invest at least $100 million during the extended contract, and increase its minimum annual payment for problem gambling programs from $125,000 to $250,000. The act is a culmination of numerous public hearings in both the House and the Senate over the past 2 years. The long process, which began with a major disagreement over the best way to ensure high revenue performance, resulted in our 2 major gaming partners coming together in a joint venture that will increase the competitiveness of the facilities, enhance revenues, and further our economic development goals. Over time, the extensive committee process led to many other improvements to prior versions of the bill, including increased transparency and accountability in the lottery's contract management, codification of the job requirements along with liquidated damages, and enhanced regulatory oversight. Further negotiations yielded an increased upfront payment to the state, an increased investment obligation, higher guaranteed payments for problem gambling programs, the steeper penalties for failure to meet employment obligations, as well as an acceleration of new employment obligations, larger office space presence, and increased 195 naming payment rights. In short, the act before you today provides continuity with the state's partners, ensures regular technological updates, and regular replacement of VLTs with competition among VLT manufacturers, promotes economic development, and protects and enhances the state's third largest revenue source. It's a good bill, Mr. Speaker, and I move passage.
Chairman Abney moves passage, seconded by Representative Carson, Representative Phillips, Representative Amore, Chairman O'Brien, Representative Caldwell, Chairwoman Valley Wilkinson, Chairwoman Ruggiero, Chairwoman McEntee, Representative Mazakowski, Representative Blazajewski, Representative Bia, Representative Agello, Representative Shawcross-Smith, Representative Constantino, Representative Cortravan, Chairwoman Fogarty, Representative Donovan, Chairman Azanaro, Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy, Chairman Bennett, Floor Manager Edwards, Representative Slater, Chairman Corvasi, Deputy Whip Ackerman, Chairman McNamara, Representative Potter, Representative Barrows, Whip Kazarian, Representative Casimiro, Chairwoman Diaz, Representative Cardillo, Representative Norrie. There are no other seconds on the bill. Leader Filippi.
Thank you, Mr.
Excuse me, Representative Messier also seconding it. Thank you. Leader Filippi. Please come to the microphone and state your objection.
Mr. Speaker, the minority leader is attempting to use a visual aid here. It definitely flies in the face of our House Rule number 1, decorum. Not allowed to have visual aids, and this is only going to open up a Pandora's box of future visual aids if we let this go through.
Thank you. Leader Filippi?
Is there a rule on point, or is this alleged to offend general sense of decorum?
No, I think it was, for 2 reasons, 3 reasons. So first reason is it was made under decorum. Second reason, in following the past practice of the House, we've never allowed it. And third time, I recall we had a debate on climate, and a certain representative left a shirt out that had climate, and you objected to it because it violated the quorum. So I'm going to follow your rules, and I'm going to ask you not to use that, please. You're welcome. Speech and debate. We have extra battery power. We can be here as long as you want. You can put in all the amendments you want. You can talk about it, but no visual aids. I think we're starting a precedent. If we do that, that would really take the House in a bad way. So I'm going to rule the the floor manager's objection is valid, and I'm going to ask you to please respectfully take that down.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, to briefly respond, excuse, if we can just...
Go ahead, I'll let you speak.
Thank you.
I agree. If you would like to, you can appeal the ruling of the chair, but we're going to have a long debate, I'm sure, on this bill.
And Mr. Speaker, because we're having a long debate, a visual aid that just is the numbers as reported by the Division of Lottery, I feel could aid this body.
With all due respect, I don't want to debate this point. Let me just explain to you. You have made a very strong argument. You have had emails. You have had brochures. We've had hearings on it. You are a very articulate, polished attorney. You don't need a visual aid to make your point, Leader. So
I don't know that it's required, but it's helpful, but I'll try my best.
Thank you.
I'll try my best, Mr. Speaker.
I'm sure your best is very good.
We shall see. We shall see. So for years, well, a year and a half, Mr. Speaker, we were debating, the only thing we were debating was 9.4% of net terminal income from the VLTs. That was IGT's take. That's the only thing we were debating, and that really concerned the lease of VLTs and the use of the central management system. That's only 9.4% of net terminal income from our VLTs. That's $49 million per year. Now, I believe that we are making substantial overpayments within that 9.4% of VLTs, which are slot machines, video slot machines. So Twin River comes in, basically agrees with everything and says, you guys, this is a bad deal. What are you doing? Go out to bid. The state should never be entering into a deal like this. The state will get the best benefit and the best deal by going out to bid. So then Twin River, they sit down with IGT and they come up with new legislation, or they propose an agreement. And part of that agreement now also extends Twin River's deal with the state. And frankly, discussing that 9.4% of revenues or the $49 million a year that IGT gets from the state, I think that now has become small compared to the overpayments that we're giving to Twin River. And I'm specifically referring to the table games, Mr. Speaker. Per our state constitution, the license, the business, belongs to the people of the state of Rhode Island. Excuse me, can we have order, please? I'm sorry, I'm trying to... It's difficult when people are speaking around, Mr. Speaker.
Please, continue.
No, Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, our business of table games, Twin River is getting 86.4% of the table game revenues. That's $137 million a year that they're taking from our business. The state, after certain regulatory expenses, is only taking 12.7% of table games, which is about $20 million a year. Now, right up the border in Massachusetts, Mr. Speaker, they get 25%. The state of Massachusetts gets 25% of the table games. If we were to match the tax rate in Massachusetts, that would be $20 more million a year for the state of Rhode Island. And over the life of this contract, the next 20 years, that's $400 million that the state, frankly, is overpaying to Twin River to run our table games. So I have an amendment, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to move it. Give me one moment, please.
Take your time.
Mr. Speaker, I move Amendment LC 001065/9.
Just one moment, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Leader Filippi moves LC 001065/9, seconded by Representative Newberry and Whip Chippendale, as well as Representative Nardone and Representative Fenton-Fung.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the amendment, please.
On the amendment, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this amendment does is that it increases the state's take from table games to match that of Massachusetts, and it dedicates a substantial portion of that increase, 9%, to be deposited in the state retirement system so that our retirees can get back their COLA much quicker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Leader Blazejewski, on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise in opposition to this amendment. I think we got to take a step back here for a second. This legislation authorizes the state to enter into a contract with partners that the state has been working with, IGT and Bally's Twin River. And those partners have helped us protect the third largest source of revenue that we have in the state. And that revenue has been threatened over the years. Those that have served over the last 10 years with me remember that we have done work in this area because we face competition from Massachusetts and Connecticut with casinos right across the border. And I was around here when we were concerned about Plainridge and Encore and MGM Springfield, and we should be concerned, continue to be concerned about being competitive. And that was around the time that we expanded into table games, and since then we've added sports betting. So what was that all about? That was about protecting a major revenue source. And if you look at the dollars that we get from gaming, of the $400 million, $300 million come from VLTs, video lottery terminals. We get 60% of the VLTs. You can look across the country, you're not going to find a number like that. And for every percent that we decrease on the VLT numbers, that's $5.3 million. So every percentage there represents a huge sum of money to the state. So while maintaining that level, when we negotiated the addition of table games back in 2015, what we did was have that number come in at a place where Twin River can be successful. Why do we want Twin River to be successful? Because when Twin River succeeds, we succeed. We succeed in getting the revenues, not just from the table games, but also from the VLTs and also from the sports betting and other forms of gaming. So what Leader Philippi wants to do with this amendment is to cherry pick one part of the package and just say, you know what, we're just going to change the number. We're just going to change the deal. Well, ladies and gentlemen, these are terms of an agreement with parties, with two entities that have been partners in protecting revenues for the state. We can't just unilaterally change one portion of the deal because we want to without reflecting the whole package as a whole. And I'd just like to add this. Leader Philippi adds the point about the pension fund in there. Well, I'd like to remind everyone in the House that, again, $400 million in gaming comes into the state. Those revenues go to pay for essential services and, yes, our payments into the pension fund. So any effort by Leader Philippi to take out one of the legs of the stool that helps this partnership work is an effort to undermine the effort and threaten the sources of revenue that go towards essential services and go towards the pension fund. So ladies and gentlemen, for those reasons, I do urge defeat of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Whip Chippendale on the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. The leg on the stool. The stool is a stool that was built by two private entities that both want a piece of the pie. One of those entities wanted to compete with the other entity at the beginning, if we all recall. One of the loudest critics was Twin River because it was a 20-year no-bid contract. The only reason they got involved was because they realized the rug was going to be pulled out from under them. They hooked up with IGT and they came up with this conglomerate. They created a monopoly. You know, it's kind of like we hear big tobacco, big oil. We always hear big and how bad monopolies are from the left. And now we're creating this giant conglomerate without a bid. Let's really boil this down and take it back. This started with a no-bid 20-year contract on technology that the state of Rhode Island was being literally threatened by the current holder of that contract. They were threatening us. If you dare to try to get a better deal, we're pulling out of here. That's what they said. But this is a fair process. Everybody sat at the table. No, they didn't. It was a backroom deal between the two interests that were competing in the beginning. They're enriching themselves on the backs of Rhode Islanders, our third largest revenue source. Gambling is our third largest revenue source. You can call it entertainment if you'd like. It's folly to do so, but it's people who have an insatiable desire to spend money, many of whom don't have the money to spend in that particular way or shouldn't appropriately be spending it. And we are balancing our state's budget on a vice. The entire thing is inherently wrong and undercuts the argument or the rebuttal to this amendment. We should be able to cherry pick. We should be able to call out the bad apples from the bunch because it was the two beneficiaries of this legislation who sat down together and came up with this. Them and their, God knows how many dollars they spent on lobbyists. It stinks. My friends on the left don't like the type of things that are happening around this when it happens in other contexts. It's the worst. The monopolies, the big app, the big this, the big that. We are creating big gambling, big vice. And we see it as this panacea. It's going to solve our problems. It's folly, folks.
Thank you. Representative Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the chairman, if he'd yield.
He will yield.
Thank you. Chairman, in this legislation, there's a lot of numbers. I'm not going to read them all. We can all read them. I think it's a 30-page bill. There's dollars going from the state to IGT and Twin River and percentages, et cetera. Where do these numbers come from?
Okay, which numbers again? So I want to make sure there are a lot of numbers in the bill.
Yeah, I mean, well, for example,
Yeah.
the payments, the $50 million commitment supposedly by IGT, the payment. My point is, who negotiated this? The majority leader was talking about this as a deal. A deal negotiated by who?
Well, it was a deal that was, if we want to call it that, it was negotiated by representatives from IGT who worked with, the Speaker's office, with my office, with a number of offices. I don't know of the backroom deals that may be referenced, but there were several parties that were involved in the discussions that came up with the true numbers that you're talking about. And of course, the lottery itself had, had people who were involved in helping out come up with those numbers.
No, but who specifically? You said people from your office. Who from your office was?
Well, I
involved
mean, I personally sat in on some discussions, but I don't think there was ever a time, I hear what you're saying, but there was never a time when I was sitting there making a deal with a number, nor have I been in any meetings where others did exactly the same thing, except that, the lottery division, people who work there, in the hearings, those are my experiences with the deal, with the numbers. So if you're asking me if I was sitting in a room where somebody said, oh, well, let's do 50,000, 100,000, I was not. So,
well, for example, the 50, I think it's 50,000 square foot, just to take one example, the 50,000 square foot expansion that's in this, why 50,000 and not 75,000 or 25,000?
Well, I think that was, there's a cost to the feet and the thousands of feet, all that stuff. And I think that was a number that both the entities came up with, at the end of the day.
The entities, okay.
Well, yeah, you had more than one entity that was negotiating, so they had to go back and forth at some point in time. And I think also that has to do with the size of buildings, the spaces, so something was better than, a lower number, and that was the one that they came up with.
All right, the reason I ask, I
Sure.
heard someone off camera say this is on the amendment. The reason I'm asking these questions, to go back to the majority leader's point earlier, is what we're being asked to do here is ratify a deal that very few of us had any input into at all. And the deal may have been balanced between other interests, but the fact that they reached some kind of accommodation doesn't mean that we have to rubber stamp it. I don't represent Twin River, I don't represent IGT. I don't represent whoever negotiated this deal. I represent the people of my district. If I don't think the deal is a good deal for my district, I have no obligation to vote for it. Other people are going to talk about what a bad deal this is. Leader Filippi already started on this. But if we can make the deal better for the state by passing this amendment, for example, we should do so. I'm already into my 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker, so I'll turn the mic over to someone else in a minute. But I have quite a bit to say later about Twin River and the influence they have over this body going back many, many years, the history that I have. But I'll talk about that later on.
Sure,
Thank you,
I
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Leader Filippi, are you done on the amendment? Second time on the amendment.
Thank you, Speaker. My counterpart, Representative or Leader Buzczewski, said that I'm trying to change the deal. Let's just be very clear about what this amendment does. There is a current contract with Twin River that expires in 2030. That contract provides that Twin River gets 86.4% of the table games. What this bill we're considering does is that it authorizes the state to extend that contract that expires in 2030 by an additional 13 years. So no one's trying to change a deal. The deal we have with Twin River until 2030 would be unaffected by this amendment. It only applies to the extension of that agreement from 2030 to 2043. So that's what this amendment does. There's no changing the deal in midstream. There's no lack of good faith on the state by passing this amendment. This just essentially says from 2030 to 2043, we are going to match our neighbor to the north, Massachusetts. And in the notion that we have low table games because we have high VLT takes, and we do have a high VLT take, maybe it should be higher because it's our business, but the table games only came on, I think, in 2015. The VLTs have been there since the 80s. This is an add-on. If you recall, the argument was, don't worry, these aren't going to make any money. The only reason that we're putting the table games in is so that it's another amenity. So maybe a husband can play on the machines and the wife can play the table and vice versa. And that's what I remember, how it was sold to us. And we were told it's not going to make money. The only way it's going to work is if you give Twin River this ridiculous percent of the table. And we've given them a ridiculous percent of the table. And guess what? Table games work. There's truth in numbers. If I could show them, Mr. Speaker, the numbers show that Twin River's taking $137 million a year from the tables, our tables, the people's tables, and we're only getting $20 million a year. So what I think is going on is that Twin River knows it has an incredible deal with our tables, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime deal. They saw that IGT was going in and getting a contract extension, and given the political realities, they were able to blow that up. And then they attached their ridiculous deal from our tables onto IGT's wagon and is now getting a 13-year extension of their take of our table games. So that's what's going on. There's no change in the deal. This is making sure that the deal going forward actually treats the taxpayers fairly. So we're going to be fine. There's going to be no changes until 2030. This amendment only applies from 2030 to 2043. I want to match Massachusetts in a lot of things, including how much our people get from their table games. 12.7% is a joke. 25% makes more sense. It's right in the middle. Let's match Massachusetts. $20 million a year, $400 million over the next 20 years. That's what we're overpaying Twin River. $400 million over the next 20 years. And what are they giving us? 30 jobs. I mean, IGT's getting a lot of money. I dispute how much they should be getting, but they're giving us 1,100 jobs. Twin River, they give us a 30-job commitment, and the 50,000 square foot expansion of Twin River, which they should be doing anyways, given that they're taking $283 million a year out of that joint. They should be doing the 50,000 foot expansion. They should have done that a few years ago. So I have a lot more to say on all these topics, but 25% is fair. It's right in the middle.
1 minute.
And there are table games. States where they're not, they're table games. Oh, I got a minute. Massachusetts. The license is owned by the developer. The license is owned by the Encore. They're paying a 25% tax to Massachusetts. The license in Rhode Island is owned by the people, and they're getting less money than the state of Massachusetts is via a tax. It's our license, and we're getting less than Massachusetts is able to tax a separate license holder. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Morales. Then we'll go to Representative Slater after that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment because of the 23 states with a tax rate on table game revenue, over half of them, 14 states have a tax rate of 20% or more. Meanwhile, our proposed tax rate for table games is one of the lowest among these states. And this is significant to note because generally, wealthier people tend to spend more money in table games than people with limited incomes who resort to slot machines. Therefore, it is important our state put ourselves in a position to take advantage of increasing table game revenues by maximizing our tax benefit and increasing the proposed tax rate. After all, it is not right for the government-created monopolies of IGT and Bailey's to garner over 80% of table game revenue while we take less than 20%. We should be demanding more than the $20 million of tax revenue that we are estimated to receive in table games. In other words, we should ensure that we're getting the best tax rate deal possible, as it will continue to allow us to continue reinvesting in our communities, especially as we continue to recover from the pandemic, given the fact that we cannot continue to depend on federal funding moving forward after this fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Slater, and then Representative Newberry for the second time.
Thank you, Speaker. I would ask my colleagues to vote this amendment down. And serving up here for a number of years, being on finance for 10 of those years, and then also serving on the Lottery Commission for 8 of those years, I share Leader Blazajewski's statements that he said, and sentiments that he said earlier. When we think about this, as bad as you can say, I think gambling's a bad vice, right? But it exists. And it exists right across our border in Massachusetts. I mean, I don't want to get off topic, but there's other things that exist over there too that I would like to make legal, right? So my point is, we are looking at this in sort of a bubble, right? And we're looking at it just right now. So we're saying, oh, let's just randomly raise the table games up to 25%. Well, I sat in finance when we had hearings on this, when we wanted to put this out to the voters, and it was called the Revenue Protection Act. You want to know why it was called the Revenue Protection Act? And Representative Newberry is absolutely right. We have a long history. We have a long history with Twin River and IGT, right? And because, like it or not, our third highest revenue is the VLTs. And the VLTs pay out. And they pay out more than any other gambling, scratch tickets, anything else. And that's always been what we tried to preserve, going back many years. So I don't think we can just take out, I don't think it would be prudent to take out. And we want to talk about table games, right? Table games, you want to say 30 jobs. There's a lot more jobs at Twin River than 30 jobs. We have the valets, we have the food service, we have a ton of jobs over there, and we've always been worried. And I've been contacted by constituents. Not only that, table games is very labor intensive. So I would say we're getting that money without the expense of that labor. And those are good, high-paying jobs, they're union jobs. And so I would ask you to vote this down just because of the history that we had. And you're right, we had originally, right, we had 2 of our major corporations arguing over this bill, right? And in the initial sense, when you asked Representative Newberry who negotiated, I believe it came from the executive office. At the time, we had some legislation that was presented to us. We had hearings on it, and there was opposition. There was opposition from Twin River, right? And want to know why Twin River had opposition to it? They had opposition not because of the table games. They had opposition about the control of the floor. Make no bones about it. It's always been the VLTs that have been the focus. And so whether it be table game, and you're right, Leader Filippi. When we started this, it was about companion play and what's going on in Massachusetts. And we had a lot of competition from Massachusetts. They were adding blackjack and everything, all these other table games, which we didn't have in Rhode Island. So we went out, the voters approved it, and we have table games, which has been important. And as much as we want to criticize IGT and Twin River, right, we are partners with them. And honestly, they've been good partners because the same, I believe it was Christensen, the report that you had done, right? The Christensen report. We had them do a report back, I want to say maybe 2016, about how much revenue we were actually potentially going to lose between Plain Ridge, Encore. I remember people coming to me, shaking in their boots. And honestly, I'm one of the biggest proponents for social services and helping out. And one of the big things why I think the lottery is important is to help those causes, to help fund those social services and things that are important to my constituency. So I ask you to vote this amendment down. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Place.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought, Brian, no? Okay. Just want to make sure.
He's next. Representative Newberry's next after you.
So, obviously, I'm standing in support of this amendment. What it comes down to is they're not our partners, they're our agents. They work for us. And in exchange, we're supposed to get the benefit from this thing. That's what's supposed to happen. We're supposed to benefit from this process. Our agents are supposed to get paid by us. We're not supposed to get paid by them. They're not supposed to dictate what we take in as the owners of the operation. Sorry, we are supposed to dictate as the owners of the operation how much we take in when this is all said and done. And the one piece of this amendment people keep forgetting about is the 9%. That 9%. When are we going to fulfill our promise to our pensioners? Several years back before my time, we made a promise that one day we were going to try to make them whole. And I can't remember a single time where this body has lived up to that promise. And I think I know everybody in here cares about their constituents. I know you do. The problem is we need to work for them, not for our agents. We need to work for them. And part of this amendment is starting to make our pensioners whole, because we made promises once. We had contracts with them once, and we broke those contracts. So this is our first opportunity to fulfill our part of the bargain. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Newberry for the second time on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, the first line of this is called the Mark A. Crisafulli Economic Development Act. Now, nothing against Mr. Crisafulli. I've heard he's a nice guy. I've heard he's ill. I wish him well. I don't know why we're naming this bill after a guy who's a spokesperson for Twin River. This is the same guy that said a no-bid deal was a terrible idea and spent months railing against it, and now we're going to name the bill after him. But it kind of segues into my point I got into earlier about Twin River and its influence. I'm glad Representative Slater brought up some of the history. In 2012, May 24, 2012 specifically, the bill was introduced to add table games at Twin River. And I don't think the dispute was about table games. It was about the deal, the cost, the money, just like it is here. And at that time, according to Twin River's own figures, 70% of the table game take, the projected take, was going to go to costs and expenses. That left 30% profit, and the question was, where would it go? And the deal that was presented back then was 18% to the state, which has now gotten lower over the years, and 12% for Twin River. And at the time, at that finance hearing, it was introduced on May 24th, which is the Thursday before Memorial Day. The hearing was scheduled for May 29, the Tuesday after Memorial Day. And I was at that hearing, and no one from Twin River came to explain those numbers or where they came from. This was different administration, different leadership here, all different people, but the same thing. There's a deal presented. We can't get straight answers as to why 20%, why 18, why 20, why not 25 or 15. No one can answer that. The fiscal staff in the House was forced to present the deal. And nothing against them, but they were just presenting the numbers. You couldn't get a straight answer as to why it was going to be 18% for the state and 12 for Twin River. Couldn't get an answer at the committee. So I went to the floor on June 12, 2012, and I put an amendment in just trying to change the 18% to 20. And no one in that whole debate could answer why it was 18. No one could answer. So fast forward, it passed, obviously the amendment failed. On a party line vote, Deputy Speaker Lima did vote for it. I appreciate that. So fast forward to 2013, the next January, I put in separate legislation to do the same thing. It was a bipartisan bill. It was co-sponsored by a future a future majority whip and a future Speaker of the House, actually. It was a great bill. And it went before the House Finance Committee 3 months later at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday. And the bill, all it would have done was change the percentage. It would have cost Twin River $2 million in literal profit per year and put it into the state coffers. You would think Twin River would come and oppose that, but they didn't do that. No. They had two guys, a lobbyist and one of their internal people, stand in the back of the Finance Committee room. They didn't even bother to submit written testimony in opposition or explain why they should be allowed to keep $2 million. It could have gone for any number of state projects. No one testified. The arrogance of that organization is incredible to me. I remember looking over at the lobbyist, who I'm not going to name because I like him personally, but I looked over him and I welcomed him and said, "Do you want to testify in this?" And he kind of smiled and nodded his head. Because they knew that we don't matter. All they had to do at that time was go up to the third floor. That's all they had to do. I don't know if things have changed. I hope they have. But they didn't care what we thought. because they knew that whatever deal they negotiated, we would just go, sure, it's okay. Representative Place hit the nail on the head. They work for us. I don't like the fact that we're essentially in the gambling business as a state, but we are. And we have to accept that fact. And the fact that we are, we should extract as much profit for our taxpayers and our citizens out of that deal as we can. And I know Twin River's not going to close up shop and walk away if we increase our take and decrease their profit. Let's be serious here. We could have, the amount of money we've left on the table because of deals made by people that would never explain who they were or what the numbers were is incredible to me. And we're doing it again, and it's worse. And the fact that when this original proposal came out, Twin River complained and whined and went public and screamed and yelled about a no-bid deal, and now the guy's got his name on the legislation? What are we, fools?
1 minute, please.
It's amazing to me that anybody is okay with this process. It's incredible. What are we doing? Vote this down, and let's put this out to bid. That's the proper way to handle this. Thank you.
Leader Filippi, for the second time on the amendment, please.
Mr. Speaker, and I'll be brief. During one of the Finance Committee meetings, Mark Christofouli referred to what the state gets as a tax. And I was kind of incredulous. I said, what do you mean it's a tax? It's our business. And the response was essentially, it's our business. And frankly, I think that really framed what's going on here for me, is that they think it's theirs. And they're operating accordingly. And the numbers for the table games certainly indicate that it's theirs. And we're just getting some pittance. While Representative Slater was speaking, on the back of an envelope, I kind of did some calculations here. This is a jobs bill. I think we're overpaying IGT. Our opinion is we're overpaying them by $364 million over the life of the contract, but they're giving us 1,100 jobs. That comes to 16,545 jobs per year. You're actually kind of in like the median of state subsidies for jobs. So, but now we look at the overpayments by Twin River of $400 million over the next 20 years for the table games. That comes to $13,333,000 per job that the state's giving them. That's about $666,000 per year per job for their 30 jobs that they're giving us. I think it's clear. Let's match Massachusetts, put $20 million more into the state's pocket per year, and give some relief to our pensioners. It's only fair. And one other thing, Mr. Speaker, Massachusetts came online after Twin River, right? So Twin River, we negotiate this deal, and then Massachusetts came online and showed that there's a better way. And to Representative Newberry's point that Twin River is somehow going to close or is threatened, 5 or 6 years ago, I think they just had Twin River. Over the past 2 years, how many casinos out of state have they purchased? 15 maybe? They purchased Bally's, this international name. They spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, are now listed as a publicly traded entity. So it's not little old Twin River who we're putting the squeeze to. It's big conglomerate Twin River who's putting the squeeze to us. And this amendment fights back a little bit on behalf of our constituents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Constantino. And then Leader Blazajewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just for informational purposes, MGM and Encore paid 25 cents to the state of Massachusetts, while Rhode Island is getting 60 cents on every game there. So we're ahead of the game. If you add the 25 cents and the 25 cents that they're getting on table games, we're at 50 cents, or the blended rate. Rhode Island is at 72 cents blended rate. So we're getting much more money for the state of Rhode Island. I think we have one of the better programs in the state in terms of how much money we're getting from IGT and Twin River. I just wanted people to know that information.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sorry, just wanted to add one more thing, if I could, Mr.
Sure.
Speaker.
Absolutely.
Encore pays us 49 cents on over, I think they have 1,200 machines. So if you take the 49 cents and add the 25 cents, it's basically the same that we're getting. But that's only on 1,200 machines. We have over 5,200 machines between both facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leader Blazajewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. Rep. Costantino is exactly right. What Leader Philippi is not telling you is that the Massachusetts arrangement has a 25% take for the state on VLTs in Massachusetts. If we were to move to 25% on the VLTs and 25% on the table games, that would be an enormous hit to the state of Rhode Island, because we get 60%, and every one of those percentages on the VLTs is $5.3 million. Every one of the percentages on the table games is only $1 million. So it would be an enormous hit. Rep. Costantino is totally right. So we are cherry picking. We're trying to pick one portion of the arrangement and change it. And I heard Rep. Place say, let's dictate the terms. Well, this is authorizing an agreement. You need parties to agree on the other side. I just want to talk a little bit about the process of how we've arrived at this legislation. Leader Newberry was describing grievances from 8 or 9 years ago. Let's talk about what happened here. There were 10 hearings on this bill over the course of the last 2 years. And in that period of time, the committee in public, where anyone could testify, was taking information and trying to make the bill better, and has done that. And has done that by adding terms like the liquidated damages provision and more money up front and more jobs guarantees and expansions of the facilities. That's happened over time, and it's happened in the committee process over 2 years. So this process has been public, it's been heavily scrutinized, it's been transparent, and we're here today with a package that is good for the state and good for its partners to continue to protect the revenue we need for the state of Rhode Island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Leader Filippi, for the third time.
Third time, and briefly. My counterpart said that what Leader Filippi is not telling you is that the state is getting 60.8% of the VLTs. That was on the sheet that was handed out to everybody. It was on my email to everybody last night. It would have been on my visual aid if I would have been able to put it up, Mr. Speaker. So I'm not hiding any balls, but the notion we have to combine VLTs and table games, I reject that. Table games have been in effect since, I believe, the 80s, where we've had a rate, and then they brought on this new business, table games. How do they affect each other? How does our I think, decent take on the VLTs mean we need to get hosed on the tables? Frankly, they're separate revenue centers. So I don't understand why, because we're getting, some perceive, a good deal on the VLTs, that means we have to get hosed on the tables. It doesn't make sense. Let's look at them individually. We're not going to reduce our VLT take. Nothing requires us to. I don't understand when the leader says we're going to have to reduce that. I don't know what that process would look like. I don't think we'd ever vote for it. But it's our business, and we're not getting enough on the tables. We should jack it up. And I believe it was also said there was heavy expenses, and that's why it's so low. I'd love to do it, Mr. Speaker. I'd give the state half, because they're killing it. They're killing it with our business, and we're getting the scraps. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Leader. There are no other lights on the amendment. Clerk, please unlock the machine. All those in favor of the amendment vote vote green. All those against the amendment, please vote red. Every representative, please vote. Just a minute, we'll get some IT people there, Chairman. Clerk, please lock the machine. 11 in the affirmative, 53 in the negative. The amendment is defeated. Back on the bill. Before we go to the next light, I've been very generous in letting people speak, because that's just my philosophy. But when we're talking about an amendment, I would ask you to please, all parties, restrict your comments to the amendment. And when we're talking on the bill, you can talk about the bill, but please don't mix them. Thank you. Whip Chippendale. On the bill.
Thank you, Speaker. One of the elements to the existing deal, and one of them that's carried through into the proposed deal, is the jobs guarantee. We've heard about that. And we've referred to these folks as our partners. Well, since 2006, the jobs element has been, which was supposed to be reported back to us every year, has been dreadful. What do I mean by that? The jobs requirement and the jobs they met was never audited in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009. In 2010, it was audited and they were compliant. 2011, they were compliant. 2012 to 2015, they were not compliant. They did not meet the jobs requirement. 2016, the state saw fit to stop auditing them. They haven't been audited since. And what happened in 2016 was that they started to get creative. Well, you know, we're creating jobs. Look at these lobbyists we hired. Look at these people who created these advertisement campaigns. We're creating the jobs. Come on, put them in. No. We want jobs. We want W-2s going out to Rhode Islanders, hopefully. So with that in mind, I would like to propose an amendment.
Proceed.
Fire when ready, okay. It is LC 001065/10.
Thank you. Whip Chippendale moves LC 001065/10 as an amendment. Seconded by Representative Place, Representative Newberry. And, Whip Chippendale, proceed, please.
Thank you, Speaker. So, what the amendment is proposing to do is to qualify a job. And that will not include someone, when you reach out to a temp agency and have a crew come in and do cleanup for whatever event just occurred, that doesn't count as a job. Your lobbyists don't count as a job. Your PR people don't count as a job. That's cost of doing business. I want as many W-2s going out to Rhode Islanders as possible, and I want that to be in respect to what they have been telling us they are going to provide to us. Then remember, the jobs guarantee was the linchpin in their threat to leave the state if we did not give them a no-bid contract. But yet, they never really quite lived up to their end of the bargain on that. So I want to help them to be able to live up to that end of the bargain. I want to be a good partner too, because that's how I roll. So I'm going to define that with this amendment. That way they can't get creative when it comes jobs time. We'll know how many real jobs have been created by this partner. Thank you.
Leader Blazejewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise in opposition to this amendment. And the FTEs, the jobs component, is defined in the legislation. It's on page 2, line 6. And the language you'll find there, if you look at the legislation, is the exact same language that we've used over the last 15 years from the prior arrangement in this bill. So nothing has changed in terms of how we count the jobs requirement. But additionally, something that was worked on through the Finance Committee, and I commend Chairman Abney for his efforts in that respect, and you as well, Mr. Speaker, that we've added in liquidated damages to provide an immediate automatic penalty for not meeting those requirements. We've also added in additional reporting and auditing requirements. These are new additions that have been added to the legislation to strengthen it and to provide additional leverage for the lottery and in some cases DBR to make sure that the obligations are met. So for those reasons, Mr. Speaker, I urge defeat of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Leader Filippi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think my brother, Chris Blazewski, Leader Blazewski, misreads the bill. On page 2, line 6, it defines what an FTE is, and they can be employed by IGT or an affiliate. But when we go to page 5, that deals with the jobs guarantee, it's much more broader. Employ, cause to be employed by an affiliate or a person providing outsourcing, technology consulting, or temporary employment services to IGT or an affiliate, or cause to be self-employed in the state during each calendar year commencing with 2022, at least 1,100 FTEs. Mr. Speaker, the problem I have with this is that this language is going to reduce the number of jobs. Because I think we have to suppose that at this point IGT is meeting its current jobs mandate, having 1,100 employees. What this language does, it expands the universe. It expands those who are now eligible to count towards those 1,100 jobs. So the lobbyist who's not a W-2, maybe the cleaning crew, maybe the guy who parks the cars, all these people who aren't employees of IGT will now count towards that 1,100 job mandate, and they'll be able to let a bunch of people go who are currently their W-2 employees. There's a reason they want to expand this universe of those who count towards the 1,100 jobs. And I think the reason they want to expand that universe is because they want to reduce the universe under which people have to be employed as a W-2 employee of IGT. So I don't know why we're doing this. I really don't, and I never got a good explanation during my questioning at the Finance Committee as to why we need to do this, why we need to have subcontractors or affiliates or outsourcing by IGT or an affiliate. I mean, it's word salad, this job's guarantee. It's word salad. It could frankly be hundreds and hundreds of different jobs that don't work for IGT. So if this really is a jobs bill, let's make sure that we get 1,100 employees of IGT and not actually reduce the number of people employed by this state. As to the liquidated damages, since you brought it up, Mr. Blazewski, and we'll get into it, I'm sure. Professor Tabaldi from Bryant University submitted a plan to us, a report, which was relied upon by IGT and Twin River, and they said for every job in the state.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Speaker. For every job in the state realizes $23,750 of tax revenue benefit, but we're only having a $7,500 liquidated damage clause. The state really should get the benefit of its bargain, and that's $23,750 in state revenues per job, and the fact that we're only we'll charge them $7,500 when they don't meet a jobs mandate, it doesn't make sense to me. That liquidated damage clause needs to reflect the benefit of our bargain, and that's at $23,750. We'll get back to that, I'm sure, a lot more with other amendments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Whip Chippendale, please.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the leader's input into Leader Blazewski's input. And he stated very succinctly exactly what I am concerned about. The jobs guarantee that is currently in the budget, in the contract, is exactly as it is in this, and clearly that is the problem I'm seeking to address here. With it, the language being exactly as it is, it allows them to do exactly what they've been doing. And need I remind folks, in the years that this company was audited, they were not compliant for the majority of time. They were compliant twice since 2006. So clearly the language kind of sucks. We're not getting what we're bargaining for. And they're just doing it right in front of our faces. So the language probably isn't that great that we've re-enshrined into the contract. they have not been a good actor on this part of the deal. And when I see the words economic development on a gambling bill, my skin crawls. But if we think of economic development, I think of jobs for my neighbors. I think of jobs for folks throughout the state. I think of folks getting a good paycheck that they will then reinvest into their communities, and that cycle of the economic trickling of the money will occur. They can't guarantee us these jobs as evidenced by their past performance and as evidenced by the fact, as it was alliterated earlier, or it was explained earlier, that the same exact language is in this contract. That's what I'm seeking to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Morales, and then Representative Slater after that.
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. When we talk about creating well-paying, meaningful jobs for the working people in our state, that should not include outsourced contracted workers. In other words, we should not allow for outsourced contractors to be counted as a part of the job's requirement. One of the main reasons for this is because comparatively, outsourced contractors lack benefits, labor rights, and have less job security than a full-time employee would. This is concerning because given the nature of IGT's business, a lot of their jobs are focused on call centers, a common occupation that is used for outsourcing. Like many other low-wage jobs, it is often people of color and those from lower socioeconomic statuses whom take these jobs. So given that we are the state and the ones with the negotiating leverage, we should not be allowing contractors to count as jobs created. Instead, it should be clear that we mean well-paying, sustainable jobs, and that is full-time employees who receive a W-2. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Slater.
Thank you, Speaker. And thank you, actually, Representative Chippendale. You made a very good point about them not meeting the requirements of reporting for a number of years. I agree. I mean, I think it was terrible that they did, right? And also, Leader Filippi, you've helped improve this bill, I think. Honestly, you did. I appreciate that. So we'll get back to the jobs. The SubA adds an important protection to the state, and the aggregate payroll must equate to 250% of minimum wage increase from initially proposed at 150%. For example, at a $15 minimum wage, the total guarantee payroll would be $85 million, right? And then the second, let's leave the liquidated damages because you said we're going to revisit that, and I'm sure we will in this debate, so we can come back to that. But the second provision requiring liquidated damages pot if IGT doesn't meet payroll requirements. For example, if IGT is required $85 million and they only hit $75 million, they're required to pay additional $2 million in penalties. But at the end of the day, right, we don't want that. We want them to meet the jobs requirement. And this doesn't take away from the lottery and from DBR still with the ability to revisit, to look at this deal and look at what they're doing in the reporting and whether they're meeting that job requirements. And it doesn't take away the state's ability to come in and change. And so I think those are important points. And to Representative Morales, during the debate, I had a number of employees that called me and reached out to me when we first. I had a good amount of employees that live in my district that did find these jobs well-paying and they support their family on. So I've had a number of them call me. So thank you. I ask you to vote this amendment down.
Thank you. Leader Blazajewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I just want to highlight the section that Leader Philippi referred to. It is not an expansion whatsoever. In the language he directly quoted, he says 1,100 FTEs. That's literally the last words he said, and that refers back to the definition, which is the FTEs, which goes back to 2005 and the Kacheri administration, and that's the language that came from 2005. And we have continued to enshrine that in this legislation to make sure that that component as to the definition of employees remains the same. For those reasons, Mr. Speaker, I urge defeat. Thank you.
Thank you. Whip Chippendale for the second time on the amendment.
Thank you again, Speaker. Just very, very briefly. We are engaged in a debate about what is a job, how many jobs, what is the penalty, and all of that, and in the context of the language in a contract. Again, I want to just reflect on the words economic development. Let's think of a really good partner in this state, Fidelity. They just added 500 jobs, and I guarantee you none of them are parking cars. And we didn't have to pass a darn thing for that. We didn't have to sit in a back room and negotiate a darn thing for that. That's a good neighbor. That's a good partner. And they produced a product that people benefit from, and they create jobs that help our state and the people who live here. I don't want to be paying for valets, and I don't want to be paying for lobbyists. That's all this amendment is about, and it is about nothing else. So if you want good paying jobs for your neighbors and Rhode Islanders, you'll support this amendment. If you want this conglomerate, big gambling conglomerate, to remain rich and high and mighty and a monopoly in the state, then you'll oppose it. Thank you.
There are no other lights on the amendment. Clerk, please unlock the machine. All those in favor, please vote green for the amendment. All those against, please vote red. All representatives present, please vote. Thank you. Clerk, please lock the machine. There are 16 in the affirmative, 45 in the negative. The amendment fails. Back on the bill. Whip Chippendale on the bill. Second time on the bill.
Thank you, Speaker. Excuse me? Number 3?
State your point of order.
Whip Chippendale has risen on amendments. He hasn't risen on the bill yet.
No worries. He can, if that's what he's reason, I will certainly take that into consideration.
Because you said that it's his second time rising on the bill.
Yeah, just to be clear, I haven't risen on the bill at all yet.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Speaker.
It's a long day. It's going to be a longer night, so bear with me if I err.
No, of course. And bear with me as I crinkle my paper. So I do have, and it just flows so well into this previous spirited discussion, another amendment for the entertainment of the body, Speaker.
For the entertainment of the body.
Yes, sir.
Can you list the amendment, please?
LC 001065/7.
Just a moment. Whip Chippendale moves LC 001065/7. Seconded by Leader Filippi and Representative Newberry. Whip Chippendale, on your amendment.
Thank you, Speaker. So we're still talking about the jobs and the requirement that's in the contract for the jobs. However, pardon me. What we need to bear in mind, again, is that, for me, certainly, this is a critical aspect of this bill. Now, we did hear some discussion about the liquidated damages being updated, and people at home are like, what the heck's, liquidated damages, blah, blah, blah. Here's what it is, basically. We're saying you guys will create a certain number of jobs. For every job you don't, there is a penalty that you will pay to the state of Rhode Island. That's pretty simple. And through the process, and with the constant involvement of Leader Filippi, this was increased from 6,400, I think it was, up into the 7,000s. Liquidated damage. So for every job they don't provide, they will have to pay that to the state. It's like free money, right? Well, I'm going to make you all an offer. I'll put a bill in. It says if you owe $10,000 in taxes any one year, you can simply pay a $3,000 penalty and we'll forget about the $10,000 in taxes. That sounds pretty good, right? We'd all be on board with that. Right? Every taxpayer would love that. That's what we're doing here. That job they create, on average, will bring $23,000 plus into the state. So if they're considering, a $50,000 job, and oh, well, we didn't hit that, we're not going to hire that person, we'll just pay the $7,500 fine. Who wouldn't want to do that? It's much cheaper to pay the dang fine than it is to hire the folks. This ups the incentive to them to live up to their word, which they haven't done yet, and I have no reason to believe that they will, as far as the jobs requirement. This raises that so-called liquidated damages, because when they balk and they inevitably don't hit the target, the state will lose. Increasing this is not going to kick a leg out from under any stool that may have been negotiated or any of that. It's simply going to make the state a little bit more whole when inevitably this big gambling conglomerate run by millionaires walks away from their obligation to hire or to employ a certain number of people. That's a very simple concept. Again, would you rather pay your taxes or pay a small portion in a fine and then forget about the taxes? Because that's what they're doing. My amendment seeks to increase that damage, because it is damage. The word damages is perfectly appropriate here because it damages the state of Rhode Island. If we're viewing this as revenue, this is certainly one of the revenue streams. Let's make it equitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Whip. Representative Slater.
I just had a question, though. I just want to make sure I'm on the right amendment on this, because I was looking in, it said Leader Filippi on the amendment, but
I believe,
if I'm looking at the right amendment, I don't want to be talking on the wrong.
No, I think he passed it off to Whip Chippendale.
Okay, all right.
So I think you are. It's. I'll just read it again. So,
thank you.
LC 001065/7.
Okay, and this would raise
the liquidated damages from 75, as proposed in the current piece of legislation before us, to 23,000.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm up on the right amendment. Thank you. Sorry. So getting back, I guess I'll get back, because I used some of this on the last argument of what I was talking about and getting up to. Increasing the $2,300 penalty. First of all, I'm not sure exactly where that number came from, as far as where the economic output that it would do for a job for the state. But the SubA adds important protection to the state in that the aggregate payroll, like I said, would equate to 250% of the minimum wage, increase from initially proposed 150%. For example, a $15 minimum wage, like I said. Two different ways the state gets paid if job numbers aren't met. Liquidated damages, which were increased from $6,400 to $75,000, which would be increasing with this to $23,000. Second, the provision requiring the liquidated damages for the aggregate payroll, like I was talking about. So bottom line is that this is critical economic development bill for the state of Rhode Island that we've been negotiating for 2 years. And to change this at this point, I just don't see I don't see the need to do that. I think we should vote this down. And finally, if we care about our schools, if we care about our social services, this is the third largest revenue in the state. And I agree. I think the protections that have been put in this bill as far as reporting goes, I know for a fact that we're going to get the reports that we need, that we're saying that we haven't been getting for a number of years. We're going to get those reports, and we're also going to, I don't think anyone's goal is to have them not meet the jobs requirement. Really, that's the idea. That's why we're calling this an economic package. And when they don't meet the jobs requirement, it's not only us that loses out, it's Twin River, it's IGT, because they lose out on that productivity and they lose out on the employees that could be filling those jobs. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Leader Filippi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, very much, and thank you, Representative Slater. A couple things. He questioned where did this information come from. It was a report by Professor Tebaldi out of Bryant University, which was trumpeted around by the advocates for this legislation, is to say, look how much the state's going to benefit. You're going to benefit $23,750 per job. So this was something that IGT and Twin River used during the hearings to convince us to overpay them so much money to guarantee these 1,100 jobs. But you can't have it both ways if you're Twin River and IGT, Mr. Speaker. You can't say, state, give us these overpayments because we're going to guarantee 1,100 jobs. Look how much money you get per job. And now we're saying, okay, we're going to get that much money per job. And if you don't fulfill the job, we're going to fine you. We're creating a moral hazard here where it's going to be cheaper for them to just pay the fine than to employ people in this state. And that's the problem. The benefit of our bargain is $23,750 as represented by Twin River and IGT, and that's what we need to get if they don't meet their end of the bargain. Lord knows we're meeting our end of the bargain. Representative Slater also said this has been negotiated for 2 years. Well, this 11th hour, why are we coming in? Well, let's be clear what this bill does. This bill seeks to exempt the executive branch from our public bidding laws. So there may be negotiations between some people. The membership of this House can exempt the executive branch from our public bidding laws, and that's what we're doing, frankly, by passing this bill. So let's make it better. And we can make it better by ensuring that the state receives the benefit of its bargain and we don't create a moral hazard where it's cheaper to pay a fine than employ people in this state. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Place, and then Whip Chippendale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the amendment, obviously. So we talk about this has been negotiated. We're worrying about our partners who are really our agents getting upset that we changed the course of the deal. You know what? If they're actually going to fulfill the jobs mandate, there's nothing to worry about for them because this penalty won't take effect as long as they live up to their part of the deal. And that's all that's doing. All we're doing is saying, if you don't live up to your part of your deal, we're going to make it hurt a little bit more. But again, you know, I guess they're going to live up to their part. Hopefully they're going to live up to their part of the deal. And when it's all said and done, this amendment, if passed, will be moot to the overall contract. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Whip Chippendale.
Thank you, Speaker. And thank you to my friend Rep. Slater for speaking on this amendment. As Rep. Place just articulated, this should never really kick in if they're as good a partner as they're being portrayed as, because this is only a penalty for not meeting their obligation. One thing, though, I will take issue with that my friend Rep. Slater mentioned was that it's in their interest, it's in IGT and Twin Rivers' interest to have those employees. Let's look at it through the lens of COVID-19 and what we're dealing with right now, and I can speak to this authoritatively. Businesses across this state have realized that they're able to do a lot more with a lot fewer people. And it's not by choice. They'd prefer to have more folks working for them, but we all know that story. Businesses, and even my own, when we were in tough times, can, in fact, save money by eliminating employees and adding more responsibility onto others. It's not a salary figure alone. It is so much more. It's the health care that we would save. It's the workers' comp, unemployment insurance. All of those costs that are associated with an employee are what the company saves. So again, I'm speaking as if I were speaking to some little leaguers and trying to make it as easy as I can for them to digest when I say it's as if we owe something, we owe a debt. Again, I use taxes. So we owe $10,000 in taxes to the state, but there's a clause that says if you don't pay your taxes, we're going to fine you $3,000 and then forget about your taxes. That's what we're doing. They owe us a dime and we're accepting 30 cents and wiping the debt free. And in the context of the debate today, the supporters of this no-bid 20-year deal have stated emphatically how outstanding a partner this venture is and will be. So then this will never be an issue. This isn't an 11th hour. This isn't any of those things. This is an insurance policy for the taxpayers of the state of Rhode Island, and it's an incentive for the obscenely wealthy folks at these two international organizations to do the right thing by our constituents. And that's why I'm here, for my constituents, not for a lobbyist, not for an IGT, not for a gambling, none of that. I'm here for my constituents, and we owe this to them. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Thank you, Whip. Leader Blazajewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I think the faulty logic in it is because the proponents have not noticed that there's two liquidated damage provisions. If you look at page 6, subsection A, that's where you find the $7,500 liquidated damages. But that's not the only penalty that IGT faces. That's half of the penalties. The second half is subsection B, which states that if you don't meet the 250% of minimum wage minimum, which by the way is $85 million per year at $15 an hour minimum wage, there's additional liquidated damages. So the analysis is wrong on this, and for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I urge defeat of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader Filippi.
Respectfully, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and respectfully to the Leader Blazajewski, your analysis of our analysis is faulty, and here's why. Because there is, respectfully, I appreciate the banter. You can run afoul of the liquidated damages by not having enough employees, but you may not run afoul of the 250% of, you can run afoul of the number of employees and be subject to the 7,500. But just because you run afoul of the first liquidated damages clause doesn't mean you run afoul of the total payroll clause. And here's how. You pay your executives $500,000 a year, and then you don't employ a bunch of people for minimum wage. And so your average payroll is still high enough to not trigger the second liquidated damage clause. Right, so that's the issue. So I don't think our analysis is incorrect, because there's instances where I'm sure the people who are executives at IGT are getting paid more than $250 of 250% of minimum wage. They're probably getting 10,000% of minimum wage, and that frees up some of the liquidated damages, frees up some of the ability to have employees under the 1,100 and not trigger the second liquidated damage clause. Thank you.
There are no other lights. Clerk, please unlock the machine. All those in the affirmative for this amendment, vote green. Any in the negative, vote red. All representatives in this seat, please vote. All representatives, please vote. Clerk, lock the machine. 7 in the affirmative, 50 in the negative. The amendment fails.